Hello, this is Jen McKee, and we are back with our Wheelchair Skills online training course, Module 2, Part 2. Just to review, in Part 1, we covered level transfers and negotiating objects such as bumps, as well as getting over dips. And in Part 2, we'll be covering slopes, ramps, and hills, carrying objects, and negotiating curbs. Just a couple of things to think about for safety when we start to practice getting up and down ramps and slopes. And these are the same safety considerations as we'd had throughout, such as keeping our hands on the wheels in order to maintain control of the wheelchair, checking the position of your body in which direction your weight is shifted in order to prevent backwards, forwards, or sideways tips, as well as to increase the efficiency of your propulsion and to decrease the strain on your shoulders and wrists, and to be aware of your surroundings and how steep the slope is. The steepness of the slope in many cases might determine the strategy that you use for getting up and down that slope. It's also important to note that most of the tips or falls that happen when we're going up and down slopes or ramps are in the direction of downhill, unless we're in a wheelie position. And so we know that gravity isn't always our friend, and it's really important to be cognizant of where our weight is and to maintain control of the chair. So if we're getting up a slope or a ramp, depending on the steepness of the ramp and how sudden the transition is from level ground, you might need to perform a caster pop in order to get over that transition so that the front casters can start to ascend the ramp. When we're going up a ramp or a slope, we want to think about bringing our chest to our knees, and that's really going to help with two things. It's going to help make it easier for us to push forcefully as we go against gravity, and it will also help to decrease the risk of a backwards tip. There are a few different strategies we can use for getting up a hill or a slope or a ramp, depending on how steep it is and how tired you're getting as you go up. One strategy is to alternate hands during propulsion, and this can prevent the wheelchair from rolling backwards during the recovery phase. So rather than pushing with both hands at the same time, you might choose to push with the right hand and then the left hand and continue to alternate so that you're not quite going in a straight line, but you're still ascending the slope in a controlled manner, and you're able to prevent rolling backwards during that recovery phase. Another option that's very similar to alternating hands is to zigzag up an incline. And what zigzagging or going from side to side up an incline can do is it can decrease the steepness of the slope, and at the same time it's going to increase the overall distance as well as adding side slope. So if you're going up a long, steep hill, zigzagging might be a good strategy to try. Getting up hills is tough. So if you need to take a break, rather than stopping where you are and putting the wheel locks on, a better strategy for taking a break on a hill might be to turn sideways and to lean your body weight uphill. When we turn our chair sideways on a hill, we don't need to put the brakes on. It's a really stable position for our wheelchair, and it's the safe way to take a break on a hill without increasing a risk for rolling. Another option for getting up a slope is to go backwards, and you can go backwards in a wheelie. Going backwards in a wheelie is going to help you maintain control, especially with a really steep slope. A really steep slope, it's difficult to keep the front casters on the ground because it can be very difficult to get your body weight that far forwards. So by going up backwards in a wheelie, it's just another strategy that you have available to you to help control where your body weight is and maintain control of the chair. So here's a very short video. This is a very long slope outside of our house, and I want to play a couple of times so you can see how my body is leaning. It's staying forwards. I'm not bringing it up and down with every push. And I'm choosing to push with both my hands together, but if I were going at this for quite some time, I might choose to alternate or to zigzag. Here's a video of Charlie demonstrating what it looks like to take a break on a hill. So she's starting to ascend the incline and turn sideways, and then she continues on up once her arms are ready. So we'll watch that one again. She continues up the hill. She takes a break by going sideways. Her hands stay on the wheels, and then once her arms are ready to keep pushing, she turns around and continues up the hill. And then if we're providing assistance for somebody up the hill, I always find it important to remind them to lean forwards. That can help a lot for the person pushing the wheelchair as well as the person assisting the wheelchair. So I will oftentimes just put my hand gently on their back to give them that touching cue to remember to lean their body weight forward. So when we're getting down a slope or a hill, our body weight is going to be shifted back into the back support if we're moving forwards. If we choose to move backwards down a hill, then our body weight will be forward and our chest will be on our knees. Again, this is all just to prevent a tip in the direction of downhill. If you're assisting somebody getting down a hill, you can put one hand on the wheelchair user's shoulder, with their permission, of course, and this will help prevent a forward tip as well as to help steer the wheelchair. The wheels should be able to slide through the hands around the 1 o'clock position. If you go back and think about the rear wheels as a face of the clock, like we talked about previously, we want the hands to be in front just slightly around 1 o'clock. There should be constant friction applied to the wheels or the hand rims rather than a jerky grasp and release type strategy. And this is important because constant friction allows us to maintain more control, whereas a jerky grasp and release might actually increase the risk of falling. If we're trying to get down a hill and all of a sudden we put a lot of pressure on the wheels and kind of a jerky grasp to slow us down, our momentum might continue to carry us forward and we might experience a forward tip. Same thing is true if we're moving backwards. If we have a jerky grasp to slow us down going down a hill, our momentum might continue to carry us backwards and we might experience a backwards tip. This is also a really nice thing to practice when you are assisting somebody. It's just to have them keep their hands on the wheels, even though you might feel like you have the control of the chair as the assistant, but really engaging them in the process and creating those good habits early on. One thing that can happen with applying constant friction to the wheels is that it can increase the heat on the hands. Sometimes people will say it's uncomfortable or they're unable to keep their hands on the wheels because it gets too hot. One thing you can do to address this is you can alternate hands in order to decrease that heat. So I might let the wheel slide through my right hand to start, and then my left hand, as just like when we're going up hills, alternating hands to decrease the risk of rolling backwards. When we're going downhill, we can alternate hands to decrease the heat that builds up from the hand rim. Zigzagging is an option to get downhill as well, especially on a steep slope or a steep long slope. Zigzagging is a really great way to decrease the steepness. Getting down backwards is a great idea if it's a very steep slope, because when we're going down backwards, we're increasing the amount of traction on the back wheels, which means more control. And also, it can be a good strategy for people who have weak trunk muscles or core muscles, and who might have a difficult time keeping their weight back into the back support when they're moving forwards. This is also a great time to practice getting down hills in a wheelie. Our front casters, by bringing those front casters up, we don't have to lean our body weight as far back. So again, on a very steep slope, doing this skill in a wheelie can prevent a forward tip from happening. It can also be a good strategy if you have any objects to carry, like books, magazines, anything in your lap that you don't want to fall out when you're going down the slope. You can just pop a wheelie and you can decrease that from happening. So here's a demonstration on the same slope outside of our house, and you can see in this video that my body weight is leaning back into the chair, into the backrest, and my hands are around the 1 o'clock position. I'm maintaining a steady, constant pressure. And I'm just controlling the speed that my chair is descending. If we are going to assist somebody, assisting them in a wheelie can be a nice way to decrease fear of falling forwards, as well as to make it a safer choice for steep hills. So Charlie's hands, you can see, are staying on the wheels. They're applying constant pressure. So she is controlling this just as much as I am. I help her back into the wheelie. Charlie stays back into her back support, nice and relaxed, to take the work off of both of us. And Charlie keeps her hands on the wheels to help slow her down. If we're going backwards down a hill, we'll turn around up at the top. Charlie's going to lean forwards. I'm helping her to remind her to lean forward so her chest is on her knees. I would ask her to move her hands forward into that 1 o'clock position. That's one thing that I would change about this. And then I'm simply helping steadily descend or control the descent of the chair. And here's an example of what it looks like to keep the front casters down during a steep slope. This is pretty steep right here. And we can see just how far Charlie really has to lean back into her back support in order to feel safe. And she's definitely keeping her hands on the wheels in this situation as well to help control that descent. So getting across the slope can be an important skill as well. A lot of roads and sidewalks that we have around are kind of at an angle or a side slope. Also getting across driveways or just anywhere if you have to get across a hill, this is a good skill to have. A person who's in the wheelchair performing the skill should usually be leaning back and uphill to take the weight off of the front casters. Those front casters tend to want to track downhill, which will make it more difficult to propel and stay in a straight line. By leaning back and uphill, you will also be decreasing the risk of a sideways tip. The user, the person in the wheelchair, will notice that they have to push a lot harder and more often on the downhill wheel, and the person assisting the wheelchair user will also notice that they have to push harder on the push handle that is downhill. Another option for getting across a slide slope is to do this in a wheelie. And again, the wheelie just takes out the front casters, and it provides you with a chance to have more control and less of a tendency to roll downhill. So this is just the road outside of our house. There is a small slope, an angle to it going down. And in this video, you can see that I'm really only pushing with my right hand. My left hand is just controlling the left wheel in order to help me stay in a straight line. But I'm moving pretty steady there, and my right hand is really the one doing all of the work. If this was a steeper slope, I might have to lean my body weight more uphill, but because this was a small slope, I was able to lean into it and help with my propulsion. So I encourage you to practice in a variety of different ways. You can start to combine some of the other skills that we've had as well. One thing that can be really nice to do is to practice stopping and turning on an incline, as well as going up and down inclines with different surfaces. So maybe you have a grassy hill outside, or a driveway or a lane with a lot of gravel. It can also be nice to practice doing things in a way that might not be completely correct, just so you get a feel for why it is that we do things a certain way. So for example, you might practice going uphill without leaning forwards in order to feel how much more you might be likely to tip back, as well as to feel how much more difficult it is to push yourself forwards. Of course, you would do this with a spotter behind you to help prevent that backwards tip. Another thing to do is to feel how your weight is shifting and how you need to shift your weight to maintain control and stability when you do a full circle turn, a 360-degree turn on a slope. Another thing you can try is you can practice getting up and down and across slopes with backpacks on the chair, or by carrying objects or bags. And that brings us into our next skill, carrying objects. There are a few different ways we can carry objects when we're using a wheelchair. The first one that I'll be demonstrating in this video is by alternating your hands. So I'll start with a cup of coffee in my left hand, and I'll push my wheel on the wheelchair with my right hand, and then I'll switch cup of coffee on the right hand, and I'll push the left wheel. It's definitely easier to do this skill once you get going. So the first couple of pushes can be a little tough, but once you have that momentum built up and you're already moving, it's a lot easier to keep going. Another option is to place an object in the lap. It, of course, depends on what you're trying to carry. I'm not sure if I would trust myself with a cup of hot coffee or even a cup of water in my lap. So just try some different things out and see how it feels. You can also use the environment to move forward and to turn around. So perhaps if I was carrying a cup of coffee in my kitchen, I could hold the cup of coffee with my left hand, and my right hand could reach out for the counters, the tables, walls, and doors, and I can use those environmental objects to help pull myself along. So here I'm demonstrating what it looks like to alternate your arms as you push and carry a cup. And as I turn, once I get going, I can turn very easily by simply pulling backwards on one of the wheels. So we'll show that again. Nice big pushes. And then I turn around and try to get going again. So you can practice this in a number of different ways. It's certainly something that can be easy to do just in your daily activity. Maybe if you're preparing dinner, or if you have a project, or if you need to retrieve toys or any kind of objects from around the house, you can try to engage the child or the wheelchair user and see if they'll help you. Reaching is another skill that's really important, and we can practice reaching and carrying together by playing kind of like a hide and seek game with different objects. You can do this by placing toys, bean bags, building blocks, cups, or whatever you have available in the house around the house at different heights. So maybe some of them will be at eye level, maybe some of them will be at waist level, or down towards the level of the feet. One player, or all the players, however many people you have to play, will retrieve the objects or the toys one at a time and bring them to a designated person or area before retrieving the next. So one way that I've set this up in the past is, perhaps I have 5 different building blocks, and I hide those building blocks in different places around a room, and I have a bowl in the middle of the room, or a box in the middle of the room. And I ask the person to go find each of the building blocks. After they find one building block, they bring it back and put it in the bowl. And then they go out and find the second building block and bring it back and put it in the bowl. When we're reaching for an object, there are definitely some safety things that we want to think about here as well. It's important to be able to stabilize ourselves in the chair so we don't have a tip out of the chair. So for example, when we're reaching for an object with our right hand, we'll be using the left hand to grab the wheel to stabilize our bodies and to stay in the chair. Or the hand rim, we can grab the hand rim. If we're reaching down towards the ground with the right hand, the left hand can hook around the back support or the push handle for more support and stability if it's not as easy to hook around the wheel. So to kind of play around with where your body is, again, this goes back to where your body weight is, and how we can use the chair to promote more stability and safety. So curves are one of my favorite skills to teach, and a lot of families have shared that learning how to negotiate curves has been a game changer. There are definitely a lot more accessible options in the world today, but we all know that looking around for curb cuts or ramps can be very time consuming, and sometimes they're not available. Oftentimes, children who have experienced a fall have experienced a fall going down a curb. And that's because when the front casters touch the bottom level of that curb before the rear wheels do, our momentum continues to bring us forward and we have a forward tip. So having a forward fall going down a curb is not uncommon. And I'll share with you some strategies to stop that from happening in the future. Curbs are really all about timing, and it's the same kind of idea as getting over obstacles, like what we practiced before. We can also use momentum when we're getting up curbs to help us, because it can be pretty challenging, especially if the curb is high. Our hands, of course, must be staying on the wheels, especially when we're going down the curb, in order to maintain control. And the demonstrations that I have in this module are with ascending and descending curves while moving forwards, but you can definitely practice these moving backwards, and I encourage you to do so. For these skills, an anti-tip device will definitely be getting in the way. So if you haven't yet already, and if you are planning on practicing these skills, this is when you'll have to flip up or take off the anti-tip device. So here's a video we'll watch just once, and it's the entire process of getting up and down a curb. So here I'm helping Charlie. We go to the edge of the curb. Charlie leans back and pushes the front wheels up into a wheelie position. We maintain that position as we come down. Once the back wheels hit the ground, then the front casters are able to come down. In order to get up the curb, we approach. Charlie leans back. We push up into a wheelie position. Once the front casters are down, then Charlie leans forward and we are up. So let's break that down. Getting up a curb is when we are going to start with a stationary position. So we'll start from a stop. We'll start with the front casters up close to the curb. We initiate getting up a curb by leaning back and popping the front casters up until they land on the upper level. This is just like when we were doing a caster pop to clear an obstacle. Once the front casters are on the upper level, we bring our chest to our knees and push forward so that the rear wheel comes up onto the upper level. If you're having a difficult time getting a rear wheel up, we can use momentum like I mentioned before. And we can do this by backing up just a little bit so that the casters are closer to the edge of the upper level, and then we can use momentum to bring us forward and bring that rear wheel up. If we're doing this skill backwards, we'll start by leaning our chest on our knees as we push back to get the rear wheel up first, and then we'll lean backwards to help get the front casters up. If there's a handrail, a wall, or any type of environmental object around you that can be used, I definitely encourage you to practice using these as well. So first of all, we'll show what it looks like again to assist somebody. So as we start to approach, we're going to stop close to the curb. I'll help Charlie into that wheelie position. And then I'm going to remind Charlie to lean forwards in order to get that rear wheel up. Let's watch that one more time. Charlie leans back, we pop a wheelie, we get the front casters up, Charlie leans forward, and then we're up all the way. I like to, again, before we start, I like to make sure that we're both on the same page. So I'll ask, which way do you lean your body to get up? Where are you going to put your hands? And I just like to do a little check to make sure that we're in this together. Here is a demonstration on what that looks like independently. From stationary start, I'm approaching the curb. The front casters are right next to the curb. I pop a wheelie, and once my front casters are up, I lean forward. I have a hard time getting up, so I back up slightly and use momentum to help. Push up one more time. I'm right next to the curb. I lean my body back. I pop the front casters up. My front casters are on the upper level. I use momentum by leaning back slightly and then pushing forward to get the rear wheels up. Here is what that looks like with a moving approach. So this time I'm not going to stop before I get to the curb. I push, and then I can really use momentum here. As I'm moving forward, I can continue that momentum forward to help bring the rear wheel up. So I'm still going to lean back to pop the front casters up, and once the front casters are on the upper level, I'm going to lean forward with my chest on my knees to bring the rear wheels up. And this is just what it looks like, a little bit closer to the wheels. I approach. As soon as the front casters touch the upper level, I lean my body forwards, and we're up. Now getting down a curve, just like with the obstacles and the objects, what we really want to consider here that we haven't considered before is making sure that our rear wheels hit before the front casters. So for this skill, we'll start with the front casters at the edge of the upper level, again from that stationary position. We'll lean back to pop the front casters up. While we're maintaining this position, we'll roll forwards so that the rear wheel lands on the lower level. Once the rear wheel lands on the lower level, we'll lower the front casters back down to the ground. If we're doing this skill backwards, we'll start with the rear wheels at the edge of the upper level. We'll lean forwards so that our chest is on our knees. Then we'll reach forward on the wheels so we can roll slowly back without braking. Once our rear wheels are on the lower level, we can bring our body more upright and let the casters come down. And here's a video demonstrating how to assist. I'm going to help Charlie to the very edge of the curve. We're going to pop back into a wheelie position. Charlie keeps her hands on the wheels the entire time as we maintain that position and drop the rear wheel back. And we can see that Charlie's body weight is nice and relaxed. It's staying attached to the back support, and she's leaning back to keep that back wheel balance position. As soon as the rear wheels are down, we can lower the front casters. Here's what that looks like a little bit closer. Again, from the stationary position, I come close to the curve, I pop a wheelie. As soon as my rear wheels are down, my casters can lower. And finally, what that looks like from a moving approach. So I will not stop before the curve this time. As I approach, I pop the casters and I just glide on down. A little lean back to pop the casters, and then once I'm down on the ground, my casters come down after the rear wheels. That's it for our intermediate skills. Keep practicing them. These are definitely getting more advanced, and they become even more advanced when you start to combine them with each other and with our more basic skills. We'll finish up with a few more skills as well as wheelchair sports in Module 3. And I have a website down here just in case you're interested in checking it out. It's wheelchairskillsprogram.ca. This is where I get most of my information from in regards to wheelchair skills training, and they have a number of videos that are more clinically oriented but can still be valuable if you need to review anything. It is primarily for adults. However, some of you might be interested in just getting more information or doing some more reading or seeing some more videos. So I wanted to put that out there for you. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and we'll be back next week for Module 3.